we continue analyzing the evidence of evolution, now looking at genetic evidence, specifically looking at the percentage similarity between different organisms. And here we'll be looking at the percentage similarity that different organisms share with humans genetically. So if we look at our genetic makeup, we know that our DNA is made up of nucleotides, basically the building blocks of DNA. But there's only 4 of these, right? So it's like a alphabet with only 4 letters, right? And these 4 would make up the sequence of your genes, and those in turn would make up your protein. So we find in all living organisms, whether they are plants, bacteria, fungi, protists, animals, all of them, the DNA is made up of these same 4 nucleotides. And interestingly, the way in which protein synthesis occurs in the different organisms is exactly the same. And as a result of having so few letters, you'd expect there to be some level of even randomly similarity between organisms. But if we compare humans with different organisms, with a chimpanzee, for example, which is a different species, we find that the genetic similarity is sitting between 96 and 99%, right? So depending on which sources you read, different articles and papers had different amounts, but most of them going somewhere around 98.5%, close to 99% similarity. Now that's an astounding amount of genetic similarity between 2 organisms, right? If you saying that humans between ourselves within the same species, all humans with the variation that we show are 99.9% similar, but with a completely different organism, such as a chimpanzee, they're saying that there's a 99% similarity, right? So that's a great amount of similarity. And then you look at the organism and start to try and look for similarities in the visual aspects, and you'll find some of those possibly. But now to really get an understanding of what does this percentage genetic similarity mean, we need to have some form of a benchmark by comparing it with the similarity to other organisms. Now, if you had to look at different mammals or sometimes different organisms that are animals but not mammals, such as insects, birds, fish, looking at sponges or porifera, looking at slugs, looking at fungi and banana plants, which are completely different kingdoms. Let's look at the genetic similarity that occurs there. So if you look at something like a cat, now if you have to look at a cat and a human being and try and look for similarities, very little similarities outwardly in the phenotypic, the way it appears, then when you look at the genetic similarities, you might be surprised to find that there's a 90% similarity between a cat and a human being. Right? So that's a huge amount of similarity, whereas the phenotype of a domestic cat and a human doesn't show that much of similarity. Now, they would say that there are a lot of things that are similar, being mammals, they have similar organs, both have a tongue, both would have salivary glands possibly, having the esophagus, intestines, heart, those various organs within us being similar. So you'd have to have similar genes, but 90% similarity you have there. If you have to say something quite different, like a mouse, if you have to look at the similarity between a mouse and a human, you might be surprised to find that there's a 85% similarity. Between a pig and a human, 84% similarity. A cow and a human, 80% similarity. Right, so if someone tells you don't behave like an animal, you are quite much genetically similar to an animal, so maybe that could be an excuse. If we look at now organisms that are not mammals, right? Animals that are not mammals, mammals obviously were more related. You'd expect more genetic similarity because of similar internal organs. But now if you look at different organisms such as a slug doesn't even have limbs such as a legs and arms, very, very different structure and lifestyle. Or if you look at a fish, which is aquatic, or if we look at sponges, right, phylum porifera, which are the simplest of all organisms in the animal kingdom. We know that porifera aren't even really made up of tissue. right? So they very, very different from the other animals or humans. But when we look at the percentage genetic similarity, there's a 70% similarity between humans and each of these different organisms. Now, this is really mind-boggling and makes you question that what does this high level of genetic similarity actually mean, right? Because you can see that these organisms are very, very far from humans. Like the porifera, for example, the only similarities you can think of between porifera and humans is what makes us animals is that they are heterotrophic, they are multicellular. But if you look at them, they are sessile, they don't move, they don't have a blood system, they don't have a excretory system, they don't have a digestive system, they are filter feeders. You find that they're not even made up of tissue, right? Whereas we are triploplastic in the embryo stage already. So there's completely different with regards to phenotype and functionality. And you wouldn't really look at relationships in that regard, but according to evolution, SpongeBob might be your great grandfather. If we're looking at a fruit fly, right, what fruit flies, an insect, a different organism completely to humans, but there's a 61% similarity. Now, funny enough, a fruit fly still has eyes, it's got a digestive system, it's got limbs, and has more similarities with regards to the phenotype to humans with regards to the structures of the body, but it has a lower percentage genetic similarity as opposed to those on the previous slide. When we look at now chickens and a banana, okay, so a chicken very different from humans with regards to they have feathers, they are not mammals, they are laying eggs, they are oviparous in that regard, but still okay, they've got legs, they've got some internal organs. But if you look at something like a banana, which is from the kingdom plantae, there's, I'd say, no resemblance to a human. There's no organs. The tissue is completely different. But if you had to now look at the percentage similarity, 60% similarity between a human and a chicken or a human and a banana. Now, if you have to say that more than 50%, more than half of your DNA you share with the banana, then what does that really mean about this percentage similarity? Does it really show something functional? And if you are equally related to a chicken and a banana, that also raises a lot of questions to how much of validity this comparison has realistically. If you look at fungi, which are also a different kingdom, there's a 50% similarity to human genotype. Right. So according to evolutionists, they're saying that all organisms, which would be all of the different kingdoms, a bacteria, a fungus, a plant, a animal, a protist, all of these different organisms all came about from the same organism. Right? Long, long, long ago, many, many million years ago, we can all trace our origins to a single celled organism that was found somewhere, right? Probably underwater. Now, uh, you can look at this data and you've got now a more holistic picture or idea of how the genetic evidence works. So when you're looking at a chimpanzee and saying that it's got a 98.5% similarity to humans, how much does that show actual relatedness is another question. And if we look at some calculations, we know that in humans, the number of nucleotides in a cell is that we've got 3 billion pairs of nucleotides. And a pair is made up of two, so that's basically 6 billion nucleotides within each and every single human cell. Now, between humans, there's a 0.1% difference between us. And if you calculate that out, that says there's 6 million nucleotides difference between humans, right? Any two humans, no matter our physical differences in appearance, there's about 6 million nucleotides out of the 6 billion that will be different. But when you then Look at that with an ape that had a 98.5% similarity. There's a 1.5% difference, which means that we differ in 90 million nucleotides. Right? So that small amount of difference as what regards to percentage can be very misleading, but the actual amount of differences in DNA nucleotides, which is the building blocks, which will determine the code and in turn determine the protein and eventually influence the phenotypes. There's a 90 million nucleotide difference between the two. And that would obviously result in significant differences between these species. I hope that you found this entertaining as well as very informative. And in the next video, we'll be looking at the theories of evolution, specifically Lamarckism and Darwinism.